Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. So let's start today's discussion by taking up the important articles from the newspaper. So the first article which appears on our screen from the newspaper reads Understanding Ethanol Blending. Now, why has this article come up? Because in the Independence Day speech by the Honorable Prime Minister, he declared that the ethanol blending target for the Indian government has been achieved before time, which means that the Indian government is working on war footing to meet its targets with respect to the ethanol blending and is keen to mix ethanol with the conventional fuel to save costs. So in this aspect, the ethanol blending becomes very important, and we'll study this from the perspective of science and tech, which comes in GS3. And general economy aspects. So let's try to understand what exactly is ethanol blending, how is it going to benefit the Indian economy and the environment as well, and are there only good points or there are certain challenges with respect to the process of ethanol blending. So let's try to take a look at it. What is ethanol blending? Now, ethanol is a type of a chemical. So it is one of the principal biofuels which is naturally produced by fermentation of sugars. So when we generally ethanol as a compound is extracted from sugars or those products which contain starch. So this is done via petrochemical processes such as ethylene hydration. So we separate ethanol, and blending this ethanol with conventional fuels is known as ethanol blending. So Indian government put out the ethanol blending program to this respect because it is aimed at reducing the country's dependence on crude oil imports, cutting carbon emissions and boosting farmers' incomes. Now, how is it going to do so? As I said, ethanol blending is when ethanol is blended to the conventional fuel. So let's say if conventional fuel is 100% petrol, and we know that when we burn fossil fuels, carbon dioxide is released. But ethanol, when burnt, does not release any carbon dioxide because it is not a fossil fuel and it does not have the capacity to emit carbon dioxide. So what if we mix some amount of ethanol in this petrol? It would reduce the carbon dioxide emission. It would also reduce the amount we are using, amount of petrol we are using, right? So this is what is ethanol blending, where if 100% petrol were to be used, now 10% ethanol and 90% petrol would be now used. So this is known as ethanol blending, and when we say 10% blending ethanol target achieved by the Indian government, it says that now whatever fuel we are using in our vehicles, 4-wheelers, 2-wheelers, we should keep in mind that 10% of it is containing ethanol. So this is the concept of ethanol blending, and in this way it would be reducing our crude oil imports because we would be requiring to import less petroleum, less crude oil. Then it will reduce the carbon emissions because if ethanol is mixing 10%, even though it's 10%, but the carbon dioxide emissions would be reduced and it would boost the farmers' income because those farmers who are growing the sugar related crops, which the principally is the sugarcane crop from which sugar is extracted and then ethanol is extracted. So they would be able to sell to the companies blending ethanol, and therefore it would contribute to the farmers' income as well. So this is the whole concept relating to ethanol blending. And what is the target? So the government of India has advanced the target of the 20% ethanol blending in petrol. So as I said, already blending 10% ethanol with petrol, we have already achieved that. The next target which the government had set was to blend 20% of ethanol with petrol now, which earlier was set to 2030, but now the new target has been shifted to 2025. right? This is the blending target which we have advanced because of the increased efforts that we have put and completion of the E10 target already. The E20 target has been preponed. So this is the concept with respect to what are the plans relating to ethanol blending. Now let's try to look at, when we talk about the blending of ethanol, what is the significance? We just saw some of the points such as reducing the dependency on petrol. We would be required to import less. And why is this being done? It is done because today India imports 85 of its oil requirements. So we keep looking at these news where the crude oil prices increases and the import bill for the country simultaneously increases, and therefore more amount of forex reserves or dollars need to be spent to import these crude oil resources. So once we decrease our import dependence on these crude oil, it's going to be beneficial for India from all fronts. So this is the first significance. Then again, saving money. When we reduce the import dependence, what would be saved? The US dollars would be saved. So India's net import of petroleum was 185 million tons at a cost of $551 billion. So which means that most of the petroleum products are used in transportation, and therefore the E20 program can save the country $4 billion annually just by blending 10 to 20% of ethanol in the conventional fuel. Then as I said, it does not emit any carbon dioxide, so it is less polluting. So therefore it is less polluting and offers equivalent efficiency at a lower cost than petrol. So this is another important point. Then after analyzing what are the significant points or the advantages of blending ethanol, now what can be the challenges with respect to that? It is at the first part, it looks like a very good move to do in order to reduce the fossil fuel dependence, carbon dioxide emission. Ethanol should be blended with the petrol or the conventional fuels. But when we look deeper, there are certain issues hidden behind in this plan as well. What are those issues? First is that when we talk about using the sugarcane for extracting the ethanol. Now this is a premier crop from which sugar is also extracted. So by diverting a serious crop required for food production into fuel production can have various consequences. Therefore, it is not a very easy thing to do. So therefore, the national policy on biofuels contains two types of biofuels. One is the first generation of biofuel, which has sugarcane and other such products. Then we have second generation of biofuels. These second generation of biofuels are those products which can be waste products. So the wasteful material that is taken out after the harvest of rice and other starch crops. So these waste crops can be used to extract the ethanol as well. These are known as the second generation biofuels. Now the first challenge is that more dependence is currently on the first generation biofuels, and the second generation biofuels is yet to come up. So that's an issue right now. So the new ethanol blending target primarily focuses on food-based feedstocks and the light of grain surpluses and wide availability of technology. So currently this is a food grain feedstock which is used to extract ethanol. But what we need to go on is to a shift from food grains to other different sources which can give biofuel. So the blueprint of this national policy on biofuel is a departure from the 2018 national policy of biofuels, which prioritize grasses and algae or cellulosic materials such as bagasse, farm and forestry residue, and items like straw from rice, wheat and corn. So which means that more focus needs to be given on these waste products, grasses and algae which are other than the crops. So this is the first challenge and the shift that needs to be done. Then second is risk of hunger. As I said, when we focus our attention on extracting ethanol from a serious food crop, what will that result into? It will result into shifting of the focus on food security. So the food grains meant for the impoverished are being sold to distilleries at a price cheaper than what states pay for their public distribution networks. That is why it's like focusing on one priority and compromising on the other priority, which is not a very good thing to do. So the competition between the distilleries and the public distribution system for subsidized food grains could have adverse consequences for the rural poor and expose them to enhanced risk of hunger. This is an important issue with respect to when we talk about extracting ethanol from food crops, because it might take away the importance or the space given for the, meeting the hunger needs for all people, especially the vulnerable classes. Then we have the cost factor. The cost factor says that the production of biofuels requires land, and this impacts the cost of biofuels as well as that of food crops. The article gives a very good example over here where it highlights the land use problem with respect to biofuels over here, which says that if, let's say, there the farmer requires 1 hectare land to grow the sugar cane, at the same let's say electric vehicles which are run on electricity, and which and let's say this electricity is produced by renewable sources. So the amount of land which would be required for the renewable energy sources electricity generation is much lesser than the land required for growing of these crops and then extracting ethanol from them. So which says that the cost of again extracting ethanol and growing these many crops and then extracting ethanol from these crops is very high. So the cost factor with respect to ethanol also is high. Then water use. Now as we know, sugarcane is a water intensive crop, and therefore if more ethanol is to be produced, more sugarcane crop would be harvested. So, and more sugarcane crop would means massive quantities of water being wasted to produce ethanol. So as we can see over here, as we are going to shift from a more polluting alternative to a less polluting alternative, it is happening that we are compromising on other aspects, and that should not happen. So the massive quantities of water which are required for proper irrigation of biofuel crops as well as to manufacture the fuel, which could strain local and regional water resources. So it has a great impact on water use as well. Then second, another problem is of the storage of this fuel. When we mix 10% ethanol with petroleum, now the target is that we need to mix 20% of ethanol with the conventional fuel. But the current storage mechanisms, the engines which store fuel and the fuel tanks, they are equipped only for conventional fuels right now. But when 20% ethanol and more number of ethanol will be mixed to them, the storage capacity of these fuel tanks is not adept to them right now, and it can lead to corrosion of the fuel tank as well as the engine. So this is also a problem wherein the apparatus required for the E20 fuel and upwards needs to be altered with respect to them. Then is the efficiency part as well. Even though we get less import dependence on crude oil and less carbon dioxide emission, but the fossil fuels produce more energy than some of the biofuels. That is, 1 gallon of ethanol produces less energy as compared to 1 gallon of gasoline, which is a fossil fuel. So even efficiency is a issue with respect to this problem. So these are the issues attached with the ethanol blending program. So what should be done? What should be done is, as the way forward, is to take care that the sources of extracting biofuels or ethanol is not primarily the food crops, and these waste products which we saw, grasses, algae, cellulosic material, farm and forestry residue, when we use stubble, which causes the problem of stubble burning and causes pollution, if that can be utilized to extract ethanol, it would benefit for in both ways. So these items should be used, and equal focus should be given for producing electricity and stress on electric vehicles. So this distribution should be done, and in this way the problem of the ethanol blending can be managed and both solutions can go together. So this was our discussion on ethanol blending. I hope this is clear. And with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. Now the next article featuring in the newspaper reads, child mortality has dipped to 35 per thousand births, says State Health Minister. Now this particular article is important from the point of view of that the Minister of State for Family and Healthcare has released the new app known as the Palan 1000 app. Now we'll talk about this app. This becomes important for us from the point of view of GS1, excuse me, GS1, GS2, where we have important aspects related to, here we have health, here we have important aspects of society. So this app becomes important with respect to that. But let's take a look at first the child mortality, which the minister is saying that it has reduced, which was earlier in 2014, which was 45 in 2019, it has reached to 35. What is the child mortality rate? Child mortality rate means the death of children who are born and per 1000 births. So among those children who are getting born, how many children among them are dying is the rate of child mortality, and it is calculated per 1000 births, which means that per 1000 children being born, how many are suffering death. So which was 45 in the year 2014, the minister says that it has reduced to 35 in the year 2019. So there has been decrease in the rate of child mortality, which is a good part. So that becomes an important aspect. And then let's come to the Palan 1000 app, which is being launched, which was launched by the Minister of State for Family and Healthcare. Now what is this app? This is the National Campaign and Parenting app. It is a very important intervention that is done for, because it focuses on the cognitive development of the children in the first 2 years of their life. So which means that this app is focusing, which is named Palan 1000, is basically a intervention done by the government to focus on the first 1000 days of the child. Now we know that when a child is born, the initial years of the child is of extreme importance, wherein the proper nutrition, proper cognitive care, proper emotional care needs to be given to the child. And the government has brought out this app which will support the parents giving information on all these aspects. So a baby's brain development begins during pregnancy and is influenced by the pregnant woman's health, nutrition and environment. And the first 1000 days encompasses conception as well as the first 2 years of the child's life, and during this period the growing child needs the right nutrition, stimulation, love and support. The first 1000 days establishes a solid platform for a child's physical, mental, emotional, cognitive and social health. So this is the premium importance. We all know how important these initial days of the birth of the child are for it. So therefore, what will this app do? This will provide practical advice to caregivers on what they can do in their everyday routine and will help clear doubts. So this is an important intervention that is done in the field of awareness and knowledge spreading to the parents and caregivers of these children. So this app would be functioning under the Ministry of Family and Health and Family Welfare. Right? So from the point of view of prelims examination, we should know what this app does and under which ministry it functions. This was the relevant information from this article, and with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. Now the next article which features in the newspaper reads, India buys petcoke from Venezuela. Now this is a very important article again featuring in the newspaper because this talks about petroleum coke. What is this? We'll take a look at this. So as we are looking at the international developments, the crude oil imports are rising for the country, which we saw again that the Indian government is blending ethanol with conventional fuels. Then the coal imports are also rising for India, and the domestic production of coal is not being adequate, and therefore importing of coal is done. And to substitute or to facilitate this importing of coal and to substitute the normal coal, Indian government is importing the petroleum coke, or what is shortly called as the petcoke, which it earlier used to do from other countries. It is now first time doing from the country of Venezuela. This country is situated in the South American continent, right? So with this becomes a very important chemical. As we know, UPSC asks about new age chemicals and new age alternatives of fuels in the prelims examination, and in that aspect the concept of petcoke becomes very important. So let's try to understand what is petcoke. This is how petcoke looks. It's a very one can say a low form of coal, because it is, we look at how it is formed. So it is India. In this aspect, let's understand India is the world's biggest consumer of this petcoke. How it is used, what exactly is petcoke, we'll take a look at that. And it gets over half of its annual petcoke imports from around 27 million tons from the United States. And this is where India has shifted, that apart from importing from US, it is also importing from Venezuela. The local producers include Indian Oil Corporation, Reliance Industries and Bharat Petroleum. So some local producers are also there, but majority of it is imported. What is petcoke? It is a dark solid carbon material. So petcoke is something which is majority carbon, and the cement companies in India account for about 3/4 of the country's petcoke use. So which companies use predominantly petcoke? Those are the cement companies. And usage of petcoke in energy hungry India recently had come under scrutiny due to rising pollution levels in major cities. So the downside of petcoke is that since it has large amount of carbon, it also releases that much high amount of CO2, and that is why recently Indian government had banned petcoke only with exceptions to certain industries, and these industries are now using the petcoke only, and otherwise it is banned. So what is petcoke? Is one of the many industrial byproducts produced during oil refining. So when oil refining happens, this is one of the byproducts that is situated. It is categorized as the bottom of the barrel fuel. Why is it known as the bottom of the barrel fuel? Because it is the residual waste material which is obtained after refining coal to extract lighter fuels like petrol. So even after crude oil and coal is processed to extract petrol, even after that what is remaining is known as the petcoke. That is why it is called as the bottom of the barrel fuel, and it is used as a source of energy and carbon for various industrial applications. Petcoke is over 90% carbon and emits 5 to 10% more carbon dioxide. That is why it became a cause of problem than coal on a per unit energy basis when it is burnt. And petcoke has a higher energy content, therefore it emits between 30 to 80% more carbon dioxide than coal per unit of weight. So if there are some applications, there are some major issues wherein the petcoke releases much more carbon dioxide, and not just carbon dioxide, it releases a high amount of sulfur dioxide as well. But it is abundantly used in India in several manufacturing industries such as cement, steel and textile, as it is significantly cheaper than coal, has high calorific value and easier to transport and store. These are the major points related to the petcoke which we should remember as to what is it, where are its major applications, and how is it harming the environment. So it releases high amount of CO2 as well as SO2, or what we call sulfur dioxide. So this was the discussion today with respect to the important articles of today's newspaper. We'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from tomorrow's newspaper. Thank you.